Hello and welcome to day 2 of AVR120 C Sharp fundamentals. So today we're going to be going over the basics of the C Sharp programming language, how to use the IDE or integrated development environment, as well as some of the basic data types, how to store variables, what variables are, and how to print and stop applications from running and also store user input in variables. So we'll kind of go all through that now. So variables. What is a variable? So a variable is a container for data in the computer's memory. It needs a specified data type. It can be a string, so that's like a series of letters that would form a word. An integer, so that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And then a float, which is 1.1, like a decimal, but it's a smaller decimal, and there are different amounts of decimal data types essentially. And a variable needs a name. So that leads us into the typical naming conventions. So the naming conventions that I'm going to be showing you is camel case. So camel case is exactly what it looks like here. So the first word of the variable is lowercase. Um, the first letter of the first word, I should say, is lowercase, and then the every word after it is capital. So, for example, obviously, camel, lowercase c, and then a capital C afterwards is the standard for naming variables. As we will learn later, Pascal case is standard for methods, and we'll learn more about methods in a little bit here. But essentially, it's exactly kind of what it looks like. It's the first letter of the word would be capitalized, and then the first letter of the second word would be capitalized as well. This may kind of seem a little boring, but it is important to get into good habits pretty much at the start when you are coding. And naming conventions is a big part of that. So here's a list of the data types that we're going to see here. So basically, as I had said before, a variable is a container for data that is stored in the computer's memory, right? So a byte is essentially a zero. If you've heard the concept of like zeros and ones, a byte is essentially one of those numbers. And the data type of integer, okay, is holds 4 bytes. You don't really need to know all of this, but basically just understand that an integer is a whole number. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, not decimals, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, whatever. Between these these negative number and this positive number here. I mean, this is not something you necessarily have to memorize, but just know that an integer is a whole number. A long is a much more precise whole number, or a much larger whole number, which can go from this negative value all the way to this positive value. So it's just if you have a gigantic number, you're probably going to want to use a long. This is very rarely used, in all honesty, and will probably not be used much as we go through the course here. This, however, the float data type will be used. It's a fractional, stores fractional numbers, and it stores decimals up to 6 to 7 decimal digits. So basically, your typical decimal numbers where uh, it, intense precision isn't necessary. So like 1.1 or 1.2 is fine. You don't need 1.25767 whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And typically floats are used in what we're going to be doing when we need decimals in our game design ventures here. Now a double, okay, is a much more precise decimal, up to 15 decimal digits, and essentially that is kind of what is used for like banking software, things where decimals actually matter and are important to keep track of. So just basically from this list here, int and float are going to be the most important things. You may use double if you really need a really precise decimal number, but generally we're going to be using ints and floats for numbers. A bool is a true or false variable, and it stores a true or false value. So you can use this for a variety of different things. To check, you can do checks on the variable of bool type and see if it's true or false there. Um, uh, excuse me, a char variable is a stores a single letter, and it's short for a character. So it stores a single character or letter surrounded by single quotes. Okay, so that's like the letter A, right? It could store that variable, and then a string is essentially a sequence of characters, so a word essentially. So a char is a letter, and a string is a word. Okay, so good things to know. Actually, you know what? Let's back up here. I'm going to go ahead and jump into our application here. And if you remember from the last video, we did this console write line and read line write. So when we play this, just to review, it will print hello world to the screen, and then if you press any button, it will continue. So we can go ahead and press return a couple times, and at the top here, generally you want your variables to be at the top of your application before you start um, writing code. That's a general, just good rule of thumb. Having random variables all over the place, as if they don't need to be in a specific location, is kind of a bad practice. So you really want to just try to keep all your variables grouped together at the top of the application. So again, let's kind of review here. So the string variable, okay, so this is a data type, all right? And you can kind of tell it has that kind of light blue. And if you mouse over it, which is what's really nice about this IDE essentially is if you mouse over it, it actually tells you what it is. Represents text as a sequence, okay? So, that's essentially the IDE really helps, Visual Studio really helps kind of give you hints and tips on how to complete what you're typing and also just information about what you're typing. So again, this string is a data type here, and we need to we're indicating that we're gonna create a variable afterwards there. Okay, so we can call this player name, and then kind of put the at the moment, we'll just put a semicolon to kind of end the line. And so a couple important things to note here, right? Um, you have the variable here. It's in camel case. Again, this is camel case. So the first letter lowercase, the second letter capitalized, okay? At the end of the variable, I have a semicolon. That ends every line in C#. You need that pretty much at the end of every line, except for when we're starting to go into like the if statements. We'll get into that more, the proper way to structure that as well. We have the kind of green squiggly line, and if we mouse over it, it actually tells us, why we have that green squiggly. So this isn't technically an error, but it's kind of indicating the program's indicating that it's not exactly correct. It says the variable player name is declared but never used. Okay, so in order to kind of what we're doing here, I should say, is declaring a variable. We're declaring a variable of type string, so the data type is string, okay, and the variable is named player name, okay. So we're declaring this variable, and what it's telling us is that we haven't set it to anything. So this is just an empty variable. It doesn't have any data in it at all, right? It's supposed to have a string. It's supposed to have a set of letters that will, could be gobbledygook, but we've kind of indicating it's going to be like a name, right? Um, so we've kind of declared this variable as a string, but we don't have anything in it. So in order to basically assign a value to a variable, you put this kind of equal sign right next to it here, and then because it's just a string, we need to indicate that we're going to be typing actual a word here. And in order to do that, we do the same thing that we did down here, right? In the hello world section, we have these parentheses. Okay, so we're going to put these parentheses here, and I'm going to just put my name, Richard. Okay, and so I've now declared uh, a string variable of type player name, and I've set it equal to Richard. And inside of those parentheses um, is this text here, Richard, which will now be stored in this variable. And what's pretty neat about this, right, is that now, uh, well, let me back up here. You'll see kind of I mouse over this again. It says the variable player name is assigned, but the value is never used. So it's telling us now that we've assigned a value to this variable of type string, but we've never used it. So let's go ahead and use it. So instead of doing hello world down here, what we can actually do now, okay, is I could delete, I could go ahead and delete this text here, and I can type in player name. And see, one thing to notice about your IDE too is um, it actually has what's called kind of like essentially an autocomplete function, similar to like maybe your phone, right? It's called IntelliSense, and it tries to anticipate what you are going to essentially put in there. So when I put my cursor in console.writeLine, if I typed in P, it would anticipate I'm going to put the variable player name in there because I've declared this variable up here and it knows that it's there, but the value hasn't been used yet. So I'm going to go ahead and click player name. All right, and that will auto complete that and put that inside the parentheses. It's a great way to just quickly get your code typed up and out there. So now, if I go ahead and run start here, it will print my name. So we've kind of shown here, okay, that the variable is holding that value of my name, and it prints it off here when I put it inside of the console write line function, okay? So this is called a function. We'll get more into that later. And I put that variable inside of that parentheses there. And I am able to print out my name. Okay, so if I go ahead and press enter, we'll end the program there. And again, I had to press enter because this console.readline will pause the program's execution until a value is entered there. Any key press will work in that situation. Okay. I can also go ahead and do an int variable, right? So I could say player age, okay? And I can put a number in there, end it with the semicolon, and again, just assigning that value to the integer player age, right? Right. And if I go down here, I can actually type console.writeLine again, okay? And I can put in player age, go to the end here and semicolon. We will save it and go ahead and press play now. And so it's printing off my name and my age. Okay? So this will this kind of basically explains the data type and variable structure there. Float, if we were going to do a float, okay, so a float would be, let's say, um, we could say like current date, and we could set that to 8/23. And I'll put the semicolon here, and you'll notice that we get our first error, okay? And so the red squiggly lines indicate an error. If I try to run the application here now, I'll get a pop-up saying I have errors. So the application will not run. So the red squigglies tell you that essentially that you're having an error. And if I actually go down here to the bottom and I click this red circle with the X through it, it tells me where that error is. Okay, I'll click here, and you'll see this little light bulb pop up here. Okay, and it actually tells you CS0664. Okay, um, that is the code name of the file, and it will tell you the line. It says line 15. Okay, so if you scroll down, the lines are numbered here to the left. So down to 15, that tells us the error is here. And so the reason we're getting this error is because when you're indicating that a variable is a float, okay, it's not enough to just have the data type. You actually need to, at the end of the number, put an F to indicate that it's a float. And now if we save it, and we can go ahead and do another return here, and we will do console.writeLine again, and I will put in current date, and you'll see here that it auto completes it. I'll double click that, put a semicolon at the end of it, save. We'll run it again. Richard 34 8.23. Okay. Um, and that is kind of a little primer on data types and variables. Okay, let's continue on. So now I kind of wanted to go back to this slide here, and good things to know. Um, how to comment your code is very important, okay? So when you're commenting your code, um, essentially this is the format. You have these two forward slashes, and then it will kind of appear in green, and then anything after those forward slashes will not be interpreted or compiled by the program, so you won't throw an error or give you an error in your code, but it allows you to leave like little notes in the code for people. So this is extremely important when you're working on a team and you're passing your code off to someone else, because they may not know how your code works. And good code is commented code, and it will explain what your application does. Okay. And then I kind of have mentioned this before, but the period of C# is the semicolon. Okay, so that's what you need to end every line. So if we go back to our program here, um, I can actually, press return here, and I can do two forward slashes. So that is the key next to your shift key. It has kind of like the question mark on it, but you could double click that forward slash and you'll see that it turns green. Okay. And so I can type anything after this and it won't be interpreted when I run the program, and I'll kind of demonstrate that in a second here. So what I'm going to type is, below is the player's name, or excuse me, what I'll do is below we are printing the player's name, player's age, and current date variables. And you can write whatever you want there. I just wanted to demonstrate that that's how comments work. And if we actually run the code now, okay, let me back up. Sorry. Go ahead. You always want to save your code before you run it. So you can double click this little, these two kind of floppy disks here that saves all of the files. Um, and that will kind of become relevant later because you may have multiple .cs files. Right now we're just going to be in one, but we're going to have multiple ones when we get into Unity. So we'll go ahead and press start here, and you'll notice that it just prints off my name, my age, and the date. Um, and it does not print off anything regarding the comment, and the comment doesn't stop the code from working. So essentially, comments are just notes in the code for other coders or even for yourself. You can also do things like comment out lines. So let's say I don't want to print the current date, okay? If I go to that line and I press the two forward slashes, that will kind of turn that line green. And now I've done what's called commenting out that line of code. And so now when I go ahead and press start, that variable, so the current date variable, which is 8.23f, will not print. So we'll go ahead and play that now, and you'll see that it doesn't print there. It just prints those other two variables. Okay, so um, we're kind of moving on here. Okay, so again, this is just a diagram showing that the data type is this string and the variable name comes after that in the camel case there. Um, And so console.writeLine is what we use to print the text to screen, and we can print data stored in a variable, which I've demonstrated already. Um, and then console.readLine will stop the execution of the program and wait for a keystroke, which I've already kind of talked about. And it can be used in conjunction with a variable to store user's input, which we have not talked about. So let's go back to the code. All right, so back in the code here, I'm going to want to get rid of all this because I'm going to write some new code. But if you didn't want to delete all of this, if you wanted to keep it and maybe use it later down the line, what you could do is set up a multi-line comment. So to do that and comment out the code. So like similarly how we commented out this line of code here, you can actually comment out multiple lines of code using a multi-line comment. So in order to do that, you would press the forward slash and the star, which is Shift 8. And you'll see that everything after that is green, indicating that it is essentially being read as a comment, right? Um, you'll also see that we're getting like 4 errors. That's because all of these brackets are commented out, and you can't do that. You need these brackets um, in order for the program to run. So you need to close the multi-line comment, and you do that by, again, pressing Shift 8 for the star and then forward slash. Okay, so kind of the opposite of what you just did. And that you can see that we don't no longer have any errors, and all of this is commented out. So if we saved it and ran it, it basically would just flash and then disappear because we don't have any code essentially being read by the IDE. So now what we'll go ahead and do is kind of describe what I was talking about, which is set up essentially a user input, a string variable that will hold the user's input and then print that to screen. So the first thing we're going to kind of go ahead and do here is create a string type variable. So variable type string We'll call it adventurer name. And you'll see we'll get the green squiggly lines here. It's because we're not using it again. But we just want to declare this variable for now because we will be using it later. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to set up a console.writeLine again to print text to screen. And I'm going to say, hello, adventurer. What is your name? And I'll end the line with a semicolon. And I will set adventurer name. Okay, and you can see it auto filled that for me. Talent says it's great. And we'll set that equal to console.readLine this time. And so what this is going to do is it's going to print this text to screen, okay? And then it's going to save whatever I type here, and then it will close because we don't have console.readLine in there to kind of stop the execution of the program. So it should just take whatever I type in and then close. So I can just show you that really quick here. Hello, what's your name? I'll say Richard, and it just closes because I don't have readline there, I should say. If I put console.readline, it would pause and then close. So again, Richard. All right, and then you can see it's waiting for the key press. It'll close. So we'll kind of go ahead and put that there. Okay, so now I want to print that to the screen, that variable to the screen. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to do, once again, console.writeLine. And we're going to do what's called concatenation here. And that's a big scary word for basically sticking words together. And I'll kind of demonstrate how that works. So I'm going to put something in the parentheses, some words in the parentheses. I'm going to say your name is space, and I'm going to add the plus sign there. And I'm going to type in adventurer name after that. And so what we're doing here, and I'm going to put a space to kind of make it a little more legible. What we're doing here, okay, is we are taking this, this is called, what's between these quotation marks, a string literal, okay? It's just text that you write in between these quotation marks. That's the formal name for it. But so we'll take this, your name is text, all right? And then we're going to put a space before, you'll notice I put a space before this quotation mark, and that's because I want a space, and then I want it to print the adventurer name, which we got again up here from the console.readLine. Okay, so it's going to say, it's going to print your name is space, and then adventurer name. So whatever we typed, or whatever the user typed up here earlier in the program. And then I want to pause execution so that we can read what gets printed to screen before the program closes. So again, I'll just do console.readLine. Okay. So again, declaring a string variable, printing some text to screen to prompt the user for their name. Adventurer name is going to be set equal to whatever the user types in. We're going to pause the program and wait for a keystroke. So whatever gets pressed on the keyboard. It will then print your name is, and then it will print the adventurer's name. And then it will pause. It'll print that to screen. It'll pause the execution of the program, and then when we press the keystroke again, the program will end. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and demonstrate that. Okay, so hello, adventurer, what is your name? And I'm going to put in Richard. It's going to wait for me to press another key. Your name is Richard, and it prints my name to the screens, and it prints the line that's on line 20. Okay, so this line here. And if I press the keystroke again, it will end the program. So go ahead and save that. And we've just learned how to print to screen, how to store data in a variable of different data types, and how to store the user's input. So we learned quite a bit already. Again, this is kind of demonstrating concatenation. So we can print multiple things on a screen using concatenation by putting the text in a console write line and then printing a bunch of things here. And then we'll go over incrementing the um, a variable, decrementing it, and then what the plus equal sign. So it's very similar to what you guys learned in math. So the common operators, okay, so that is the plus, addition, subtraction, the equal sign, the greater than, or the less than um, signs as well. And this is the assignment operator. So this isn't just the equal sign. It assigns the value to a variable. And then the uncommon operators, okay, is this plus plus, so that's incrementing. So whatever's after that, or what, if this is put at the end of a variable, whatever that variable is, it will add essentially one to it. This will subtract one from it, decrement it by one. This plus equals essentially will take whatever is on the left-hand side. So, if whatever is the player's health variable is currently, and it will just add 5 to it, um, or add whatever number is after the plus equal sign on the right-hand side. So if this was 10, it would plus equals, if it said plus equals 5, it would be 15. And then minus equals is the same thing pretty much here. So instead of adding 5, if this was 10, we had minus equals, that would equal 5. And then this will come more into play when we start talking about if statements and just kind of those logic statements in general. Um, this is more this is very similar to the assignment operator here, but it's more so an approximation of what's of comparing something on the left to the right. The left-hand side of this, whatever variables on the left-hand side of this, to whatever value or variables on the right-hand side of this. And we'll get more into that later, so don't worry about that too much right now. And then this last one here is not equal to. Okay, so the exclamation point and equals basically says whatever the variable is on the left here is not equal to whatever the variable is on the right there. So if this is assigning a value, so if there is a value on the left hand side, um, and this is assigning a value to the right-hand side. This is saying that this is not equal to um, what's on the right-hand side. Okay, so to kind of go back to the code and demonstrate some of this here. Okay, so excuse me one second. We'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and go back to the code and we'll demonstrate some concatenation. So I will say your name is right, and then so let's make some additional variables. So let's make a player health variable. We'll set that as an integer. So the integer player health, and we'll set that equal to 10 for now. Okay, and let's say we want to print this off to screen. So if you guys remember, we just would use console.writeLine, right? So we can just concatenate this to the end of this, okay? And we can add another string literal. Okay, so add another set of quotations and say, so we can say that your name is adventurer name. Okay, and we could say, actually, you know what? This is going to be more legible. So we'll kind of put this underneath your adventurer's name is, and then we'll type console.writeLine, and we'll say player, the adventurer's health is space. We'll add a plus sign, and we'll type in player health there, and put a semicolon at the end, and that will print off the player's health. And again, we're concatenating this text to this variable here, and then we're pausing the execution here. So if we look at that there, say Richard, your name is Richard, the adventurer's health is 20, is 10, I should say. Okay. So let's say you didn't want to just say the adventurer's health. Okay. What we could do instead, um, we could actually use that variable, right? So adventurer name. So we'll go to the beginning of these parentheses here, and we'll type in adventurer name. You'll see it kind of completes that there for you. Adventurer's name. Um, uh, and we will actually concatenate that to um, this text. We'll get rid of the adventurers here. And so we'll say Richard's. It's going to basically print off Richard's health is, and then it will print off the player health variable. So it will print the what was entered by the user, which in this case it would be Richard, and then space health is space, and then it will print off the player health variable, which is 10. So go ahead and save that. We'll print it out. We'll try to run it. Okay. Say Richard, and your name is Richard. Richard's health is 10. Okay. So you'll see that it worked there. So it printed off Richard's health is 10. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and start experimenting with the incrementing and decrementing operators here. Okay, so we'll do another couple returns here, and we will take the player health variable, okay, and we will increment it, or we'll let's actually uh, let's go ahead and oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and we'll just increment it, and that is going to add +1 to the player's health there. Okay. So we'll say console.writeLine, and we'll say something like adventurer's name plus, and we'll say space is thinking good thoughts. His spirits are lifted. Excuse me. Put the semicolon at the end there. And so we will then print off the new value of, we'll print off the name that the user input. And we'll say his HP is space plus player health. And we'll go to the end of the line and press, put the semicolon in there. And so what this will do is it'll increment the player's health by 1. Console.writeLine will run. It will say print off the name that we input earlier. Is thinking good thoughts. His spirits are lifted, and then it will print off to another line. It will, return present off to another line and print the name. HP is, and then it will print off the new value of player health. Okay, so it should print off 11. So we'll go ahead and save that, run it. Hello, my name is, we'll say Richard. Richard's. And I made the mistake once again of not putting console.readline there. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Save it. Richard. Okay, health is 10. Richard's thinking good thoughts, his spirits are lifted. Richard's HP is 11 now, right? So we've kind of proven that the increment operator is adding +1 to that value. Good, save it. And then now let's do an example of decrementation, a decrementing variable. So we'll go ahead and once again do player health. We will add in a minus sign and then a semicolon. And now we can go ahead and write something like adventure name stubbed his toe while walking to begin his adventure. And then console.writeLine again. And, very similarly to what we just did, we will print out the value, the new value of player health. And so you can kind of see that you can change the values in variables depending on what you do to them. In this case, we are incrementing and decrementing that variable. So adding 1 and then subtracting 1. And then so for the sake of brevity here, I'm just going to go down here and I'm going to do the same thing now. And I'm going to do a plus equals 5. And again, remember, basically it's going to take whatever value, okay, is on the left-hand side. So the player health, which should be 10 again, right? Because we added 1, we subtracted 1, okay? And so it should be 10, and it's going to add 5 to that. And so we're going to just do the same thing. We're going to print it off again. I'm actually going to just to make it a little bit quicker, I'm just going to copy this code, and I'm going to highlight this and just say put a bandage on his toe. And I will go ahead and print the name and the player health again, and we'll do console.readline as well. Okay, so go ahead and save all that, and let's run it. So my name, enter that. Your name is Richard. Richard's health is 10. Then he's thinking good thoughts. His spirits are lifted. My HP is 11 now. I stub my toe. Now I've dropped a hit point, so my hit points are 10. And then I put a bandage on my toe, and I've increased my hit points by 5. And so we can kind of see here it just runs through this code. And I did spell bandage wrong, so I'm going to fix that. I'm going to save it, and there you go. So that will pretty much kind of take us through the second day here to get. So we'll kind of go a little bit more in depth tomorrow about logic statements and flow of the program and how to kind of control the flow of the program via logical statements here. So, okay, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one.